Thank you, Alex, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. What I was going to do today was talk about a little bit about innovation and why it's important in the public sector, a bit about innovation and leadership, and then I was going to close by talking a little bit about innovation in IP Australia, where I'm now the Director General. So you may have noticed that the Institute of Public Administration recently released a policy discussion paper on public sector innovation. And they highlighted that government activities and investments account for about 35% of GDP in Australia. Moreover than that, government activity contains critical aspects of economic and community life, such as the health system, the education system, as well as the provision of the economic, regulatory and physical infrastructure that underpins community wellbeing. In addition, all the really complex policy tasks, as you would know, are on the public sector agenda. Climate change, energy security, environmental degradation, increasing inequality. So clearly the application of new ideas and approaches, new technologies and new systems of management, that is innovation, is essential to effectively meeting the challenges faced by the public sector and also to promoting Australia's general competitiveness and prosperity. Over recent years, the importance of public sector innovation has been widely acknowledged, both here and abroad. In Australia, we've had numerous reports to government, and we also have an APS Innovation Action Plan supported by our APS leaders, the Secretary's Board. The IPA paper is the latest in a series of reports, and some have come from within and others from without, that emphasise the importance and the benefits of innovation to the public sector and seek to identify and encourage the means to achieve it. And on a number of key points, that paper agrees with earlier studies. It finds that innovation in the public sector does take place relatively broadly, despite a wide range of barriers. However, it also finds that the innovative capacity of the public sector could be substantially enhanced if it took a more systematic and strategic approach to embedding innovation in its day-to-day work. Despite some notable successes, innovation in the APS is often patchy and undertaken on a somewhat ad hoc basis. And that might not be good enough in a context where innovation is now seen as a powerful influence on productivity and organisational performance. So are we making progress on achieving a more innovative public sector? Despite public commitments to innovation, is it really a priority? And what sort of leadership do we need to foster public sector innovation? Well, that's partly answered by looking at what encourages innovation and what deters it. So what impedes innovation? Well, inherent conservatism, rigid and opaque processes and structures that breed a culture of conformity and punish non-conformity. A closed internal focus which assumes that all the answers must come from within. Strong risk aversion and tight control of employees and their work content and structure. Now this is recognisably a description of the traditional bureaucracy. In fact, Danish pioneer of public sector innovation, Christian Basson, suggests, and I quote, that the very DNA of bureaucratic organisation is resistant to innovation. On the other hand, what promotes innovation? Well, openness and acceptance that ideas and services are not always sourced from within, that collaboration and co-creation, which can bring a diversity of experience and ideas to bear, can deliver some better outcomes. A level of autonomy and control for staff over their work, flatter structures and devolved decision-making, encouragement and rewards for creativity and risk-taking. Now, some factors can work both ways. For example, pressure might be positive, especially if it stems from the challenging and intellectual nature of the task. But too much pressure can stifle creativity, starving it of the time and resources that it needs. Resources themselves can also have a positive or negative effect. So resource cuts can in fact stimulate innovation by requiring us to rethink how we can achieve the outcome with fewer inputs. Conversely, in some cases, innovation will require an investment of resources, and it can be strangled if there are none available. Now, arguably at present, there isn't a lot of overt focus on public sector innovation. Rather, the focus is understandably on meeting the priorities of a new government in a climate of fiscal restraint and significant resources and staff reductions. However, in a recent Financial Review article, Tough Times Require the I Word, Verona Burgess, reporting on the release of the IPA paper, made the point that in such a climate we have no choice but to innovate. While the I word might not be in vogue, its importance is probably stronger than ever. Her comment was that innovation is not at the forefront of government thinking on the public sector yet. However, there are some good reasons to expect government support for public sector innovation because it will be necessary to deliver on the government's agenda, an agenda that aspires to significant change. Take 3 of the government's signature reforms: smaller government, deregulation, and abolition of the carbon tax. Sustainable smaller government can only be achieved if we adopt alternative approaches and find more efficient ways of achieving our objectives. So we've downsized the APS in the past, but the effect has only ever been temporary, arguably because we didn't fundamentally change what we did or the way we did it. A public service that is smaller, less top-heavy and has fewer resources will require some new structural and organisational models and a more open approach to working with and through third parties. A substantial reduction in regulation requires us to rethink the boundaries of government activity and to put more focus on other levers and other players to achieve what's needed. While the development of new and alternative approaches to achieving our carbon reduction targets will require some innovative policy approaches. So even if we don't use the I word, clearly we need new thinking, new approaches, and the implementation of new models if we're going to achieve these objectives. Now, in the face of downsizing, resource pressures, and an ambitious government agenda for change, is not the time to lose focus on public sector innovation. It's exactly the time to promote it. So do we have the right models of leadership to deliver on required outcomes? Is leadership in the APS evolving in the right direction? Well, over recent decades, there's been significant development on leadership thinking, as Grant indicated. We hear about adaptive leadership, authentic leadership in the Oscar Wilde style, and transformational leadership, just to name some. And this is reflective of a broad evolution of leadership thinking and practice in business and the wider community. Command and control styles of leadership have generally given way to more open and inclusive leadership styles that seek to engage and motivate the workforce. And while these have initially been developed with a focus on the private sector, the public sector has also embraced such new leadership thinking, and it does have positive implications for innovation. So take, for example, adaptive leadership, a framework designed to help leaders and their organisations adapt to new challenges and to make the most of opportunities presented by a changing environment where clear solutions may be elusive. It encompasses a distributed leadership approach that allows people throughout the organisation to play leadership roles. And while it's not the only useful leadership model around, it is indicative of the leadership thinking and education which is now prevalent in the public sector. Certainly, leadership styles in the APS have changed and evolved considerably over recent decades as the leadership adapts to new needs and requirements and reflects changes in broader leadership trends and practices. And mostly I think this is in response to changing demands and expectations on leaders, especially public sector leaders. The APS now faces increasingly complex policy issues played out in the context of a global rather than a local environment. Citizen expectations of public service quality have risen, while at the same time there's increasing pressure on public budgets for greater efficiency, productivity and cost reductions. And there's also increasing contestability in the provision of public services and even policy advice. So arguably, these demands require a different leadership approach from the past, one with more focus on skills such as relationship building, capacity building, collaboration, strategic forward planning, initiative, considered risk-taking and dispute resolution. Not only has there been a change in the nature of our work in the APS over recent decades, but there's also been a change in the nature of our workforce. We now have a more professionalised workforce, employing many more graduates, with much of the frontline customer service work now outsourced or privatised. And such a workforce, better educated, taught to analyse and question, and with a greater focus on seeking engagement and satisfaction from their work, also demands some different leadership attributes. We now require more inclusive and collaborative approaches that can engage our highly skilled employees and that demand initiative and performance rather than conformity from our staff. Now, clearly there are some inherent characteristics of the public sector that will always present barriers to innovation. Our roles require a high degree of public accountability, and thus working within a sometimes restrictive, rules-based framework is inevitable. Our stewardship of critical public sector services and activities rightly attracts close scrutiny by the Parliament, the media and the public, and we operate to serve ministers in a political environment. Tolerance for risk and failure is limited. Undertaking innovation in the APS has been described as long on risk and short on reward, and it is one of the challenges of APS leadership to balance these factors and to make sure that there is room for, and indeed a systematic approach to, innovative forward-thinking and approaches. It's also the case, though, that some other public service or public sector characteristics may increasingly mitigate in favour of innovation. It's argued, for example, that creativity is more likely to occur in jobs where there are complicated, ill-defined problems requiring innovative solutions. Such work requires expertise and often collaboration. It requires a highly skilled and motivated workforce able to explore alternative ideas under ambiguous conditions. And arguably, therefore, both the type of work that the public sector is increasingly required to perform and the type of people that increasingly make up our workforce predispose us to greater levels of innovation. So what are the key leadership elements we need to adopt in order to facilitate innovation within our organisations? Well, first, it's clear that as leader you do not have to be the organisation's chief innovator, something I was pleased to know. There are likely to be others within the organisation with greater skills and capacity and better ideas. But rather, as leader, your role is to create the environment and the opportunity for innovation to occur. To flourish, innovation needs ownership at the highest level. It needs a leader who can be a champion and an enabler of innovation. The role of leader, therefore, is to create the framework conditions for innovation to flourish within the organisation. And sometimes this means recognising that you, yourself, can't lead the necessary change and empowering others who have the capacity to do so, and that can be an uncomfortable place for a leader to be. It is likely to mean taking some risks, expecting some failures, and being prepared to persevere and follow through. That is, not lose enthusiasm when problems or failures inevitably arise. There's usually resistance to doing things differently, and it will often require considerable persuasion, persistence and determination by the leadership to effect change. So what leadership behaviours do we need to adopt to effectively play this role of enabler of innovation? Well, I've nominated 5 key areas. The first is open leadership behaviours, adopting outward-looking strategies based on an acceptance that ideas and services won't always be sourced from within. Your role as leader is to gather ideas and tap into talent widely, to bring together the best ideas and talent and utilise them effectively. We need to lead public sector organisations in a more collaborative, open and inclusive way, encompassing a mix of internal and external input. Second, build a supportive environment and culture. Do the people that you lead see you as having a risk appetite, as rewarding innovation and tolerating some inevitable failures? Leadership behaviour sets the culture more than any other single factor. You can provide employees with permission and means to develop and try out new ideas. Establish a bottom-up capacity to generate ideas and capture them, as well as a top-down approach. Encouraging diversity and openness to new ideas is also very important. Flatter structures and organisational approaches that devolve decision-making and push responsibility down the chain will also support an innovative culture. Third, build innovative capacity. Develop capacity for innovation within your workforce. Do they have the skills, the technology and the resources required to develop and apply innovative approaches to work and to other parties that they need to work with on these issues? If not, take steps to develop the relevant skills in your employees and signal that you value those skills. Fourth, develop a systematic approach to innovation. As noted earlier, often public sector innovation happens on an ad hoc basis. So give a clear mandate for innovation within the organisation, included in your planning framework. have a system for capturing and implementing ideas from within the organisation, and also have a strategic approach to partnerships and collaborations to capture external ideas. Develop a systematic approach to developing, applying and evaluating innovation within the organisation. And lastly, measure and reward it. As I said earlier, there are those that say that the APS risk-reward trade-off is currently long on risk and short on reward. To promote innovation, staff need to understand that it is valued within the organisation. Inclusion of innovation in strategic and operational plans and in performance agreements ensures there's a clear focus on it as an organisational goal, and also requires measurement or assessment of whether it's being achieved. And as noted above, evaluate and learn from your efforts. Innovation, of course, is something that we now seek to measure more broadly through questions included in the APSC's State of the Service Census, and it's also a focus of agency capability reviews. And these exercises help to maintain a service-wide focus on innovation and set some benchmarks to measure progress and also provide a spur for further action. We should also make sure that we reward and celebrate innovation successes. Making a point of this as a leader reinforces the message and helps to establish an organisational culture supportive of innovation. Now, to conclude, I just wanted to briefly refer to what we are doing at IP Australia. IP Australia is, for those of you who don't know, the Patent and Trademark Office. And we underwent an agency capability review earlier this year, and that review will be published by the APSC towards the end of the year. However, the review rated the agency relatively well on innovation. In fact, it rated us more highly than we had rated ourselves in our self-assessment. I think largely because it was happening on an ad hoc basis, and we didn't actually, it took them to sit down and have a look at what we were doing in total to convince us that we were doing quite a lot of innovative things. So on the one hand, IP Australia is a strongly rules-based organisation and relatively hierarchical. But on the other, it has one of the public service's most highly skilled workforces. It has strong connections to comparator organisations globally, has a clear mandate and a reasonable level of flexibility in pursuing it, as long as we achieve the desired results. So I'll give 4 examples of innovation within our organisation. Over recent years, IP Australia has moved to make its data more accessible and useful to customers and stakeholders. So patents and trademarks data is publicly available through our AusPat and Atmos systems. Plus, we've established value-added systems such as our Trademark Head Start system, which allows those seeking to register a trademark to apply online for a rapid preliminary assessment of whether their trademark will be registerable or not before they start any formal processes. And overall, we're moving to provide open data for all IP rights through data.gov.au. And this will include linked datasets where IP rights data is linked with Australian business numbers and related data. And this will allow, for the first time really, analysis of how the IP system is used by sectors of the economy, such as by small business, by large business, by sectors in particular, technology fields, for example. So it would be particularly useful to policymakers and to researchers. Secondly, IP Australia has been a public sector leader in introducing teleworking. So originally we did this in response to our inability to attract and retain patent examiners in key professional areas. We established a workforce of so-called outposted workers who live in locations all over Australia and undertake patent examination roles remotely. An increasing number of our Canberra-based staff now also work from home for part of the week, thus avoiding a daily commute. Now, this has involved some new organisational approaches and resolving a range of issues, particularly the development of our Viper system to allow reliable remote access, but also including security issues, workplace health and safety, and importantly, ensuring ongoing engagement of outposted staff with the workplace and avoiding isolation. Currently, IP Australia has 63 outposted staff who work remotely from locations around Australia and 114 staff who work in the Canberra region, primarily from home. Another 455 of our staff work remotely on an ad hoc basis. So more than 15% of our staff primarily work remotely, while another 40% work remotely for at least part of the time. And partly in response now to having a significant number of staff that are not based full-time in the office, we're about to launch a flexible work environment pilot in our Woden offices to look at how we might design our physical environment differently to support our more flexible work structures. Thirdly, for a number of years, IP Australia has been involved in training patent examiners from less developed countries, largely from Southeast Asia and the Pacific, but also from Africa. To reduce costs and to improve efficiency, we have developed something called the Regional Patent Examiner Training Program, which is a blend of online and face-to-face training, allowing trainees to do much of their training while remaining in their home countries and their home offices. The program's been a significant success and is now being used as a model for such training in other parts of the world. And IP Australia has also benefited, as we're now developing an online program to help train our own domestic examiners, which will give us a great deal more flexibility in recruitment and training and a more cost-effective approach. Lastly, we've developed a patent analytics capability with the capacity to assist both policymakers and business. So we not only have access to global data on patent filings, but also we have the expertise to analyse and map global patent activity. And such analysis can show what technologies are being developed and by whom. For businesses, it can show them who their key competitors are and also reveal opportunities for collaboration with those developing complementary technologies. It can reveal areas of gaps and opportunities for technology development. So such analysis is valuable not only for businesses, but for public sector research agencies and those in government that prioritise and fund research and development. So these examples demonstrate a range of innovative approaches and products or services developed at IP Australia over recent years. They've happened largely through responding to the needs and desires of our customers and stakeholders, through staff ingenuity and through working in partnership with others. However, our capability review did find that we had the capacity to more effectively tap into and capitalise on what it described as the innovative spirit of our highly qualified staff. We've thus recently introduced an ideas management system to more systematically encourage and capture the innovative ideas of our staff. More broadly, in response to the capability review, we're making a range of organisational changes to push greater responsibility down the chain, reduce internal red tape that adds no value, and streamline and make more inclusive our governance processes. All changes that should help to foster an environment more supportive of innovation. So in conclusion, my view is that while the capacity for innovation and innovative leadership may differ across the public sector, I don't think we're leader-sunk. I think new models of leadership are required for innovation to flourish in the APS, and I think those new models are developing and are being applied more widely in response to new demands and challenges that we face. While rates of progress do vary, I think, ultimately what governments and the public want from us does require us to adopt leadership models that foster innovative ideas and approaches. And as public sector leaders, I think we are adapting our leadership models to address that reality. Thanks very much.